This podcast is recorded on Gadigal land. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Hey chicks, I'm Sal, and it feels so weird just ending it there, but this is Two Broke Chicks, the show that shares life lessons and tips to help make you rich in life. And today, Al's not with me because she's had to jet off to Melbourne, so she will be very sorely missed. But I'm not alone because I am joined by the absolutely incredible Dr. Lila Landowski, award-winning neuroscientist, lecturer at the University of Tasmania and Vice President of Science and Technology Australia. Welcome.
Thank you.
I am so excited to have you on the pod today because we're talking all things productivity, memory, popcorn brain. So I feel like I've got a lot of questions for you that I'm like, yeah, look, the chicks are going to get a lot from this, but so am I. So I'm excited to dive in.
Sounds fabulous. I can't wait to talk about my favourite body part, so it's good.
The best one, and honestly needs more attention. But before we get into the juicy questions, what's your life lesson of the week?
Look, I think my life lesson of the week is probably like a life lesson of all time for me. And I've learnt that the richness of life for me comes from the people in it. Not the stuff I have, not anything else that's material, but it's actually the connections with people, making new friends and having those really great people in your life.
Honestly, I think you kind of get that understanding more and more as you grow up because I know for me personally in my early 20s, I was so, and I guess I still am, but, you know, very career oriented and really thought about that as being the biggest marker of having a successful life. And then the more amazing things I've experienced, which are all so great and I'm so grateful for, it is like the relationships and friendships that you have at the end of the day that mean the most, right?
Truly, absolutely. And you want to share them with people who have the same values, who actually want the best for you. I think when we're younger, we're friends with whoever's at school with, and we don't necessarily have things in common with them. And I think as we get older as well, we meet people who are on the same path of life or have those things in common with us. And I think you can form some really robust friendships because you have those things in common.
Exactly. Instead of relationships by proximity, it's based on values.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I love that. What a beautiful way to start the episode. My life lesson is something that I saw when I was scrolling this week that I actually thought was kind of relevant to today's topic. And it's that our skin is the largest sensory organ on our body, which makes sense and seems super obvious, right? But then I realized that's why it's so important to prioritize materials that make you feel good and make you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Like whether that is your bedding or your clothes, and being really conscious of that and how that has like a huge impact on your mental health and what's going on.
Yeah.
Whereas I never really would have thought about that or, you know, I guess gave that the attention that it needs, that comfort truly is key.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about our skin is it's kind of like, as far as our body's concerned, it's like a low priority thing. So if you're stressed, it's going to take blood flow away from the skin and you're more likely to have pimples or dry skin, or your hair might fall out or go grey. So it's also like, it's really influenced by what's happening in our lives.
Holy shit. See, that's the thing. I feel like every time I like go to the doctor about something, they're like, it's stress. And you're like, okay. But we'll get into that more in this episode, but it's wild that it really is. It's all connected.
Yeah, it truly is.
Okay, well, let's get into the juicy stuff of the episode. Before we really dive in, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into neuroscience?
I never wanted to be a neuroscientist. I never planned to be a neuroscientist. I always wanted to work in developing therapies for things. So when I was at a grade 4 school camp, I caught my first fish and I remember holding it and it was disgusting. It was covered in slime. And the slime was kind of like forming webbing between my fingers. And I'd heard of things like shark liver oil or like fish extracts that could be helpful for people. And I remember holding it thinking, oh, wouldn't it be cool if one day when I grow up, I could find a fish extract that could help people. And that was really my naive idea that I took all the way through to uni because I didn't have any mentors. I didn't have anyone who could kind of guide me in life. So I ultimately did a degree in medical research. And when I was doing that degree, I was sitting in a neuroscience lecture And the neuroscientist that was giving that lecture was talking about some of his work. And I remember looking at it thinking, I maybe have a different way to interpret what he's talking about. And maybe I wanted to really test this idea that I'd had. And I ended up, testing that idea, doing a doctorate in neuroscience and then making that my career. And the cool thing is that through that work, I discovered a natural protein that could regenerate nerves in the skin. And that protein can be found in fish. So it's almost like life came full circle.
Oh my God, the fish oil prophecy came true. I love how that's the like mind-blowing, life-altering realizations you were having when you were in year 4.
It's one of those things that, like, unless you've been exposed to something, you don't know that you might want to do it as a career. So we're totally influenced by what we see on TV. And yeah, Britney Spears is awesome. Like, who wouldn't want to be her?
True. So true. But I think it's really interesting because, like we were saying, all of these things are connected, like when we were talking about the relationship between your brain and your body and your mental health, and how a lot of these things that we think are different parts of our body and they have their own functions, which they do, but they truly are all very, very related. And in, today's society, we're so productivity and output focused, but has our constant need and chase for productivity made us less productive?
Yeah, definitely. Because our brain can only do so much, and we're constantly pushing it and trying to do more and more with what we've got, right? And one of the big things that happens is we're constantly context switching. So we're doing one thing and then we're doing the next thing. And just think of it like this. If let's say you're in a kitchen making a meal, and then every 5 minutes you have to go to another kitchen to start making another meal. You never finish the first one, and then you go to the next one, you've got to figure out what this new recipe is, and you've got to, it takes time. And that's basically kind of what the brain is doing each time we context switch. We've got to take time to refill what we call our working memory with whatever it is that we're doing. And it basically costs the brain. So it takes a lot of energy and it's just really inefficient. So we're never multitasking. What we're doing is really task switching, and it's just really inefficient for the brain.
Wow, that's so interesting because typically we would have seen like having a skill to multitask is like a badge of honor, and that women are especially expected to multitask and juggle multiple things at once. And it's like, yeah, that's probably good to be able to do to a point, but a lot of the time it's to our detriment, right?
Yeah, and look, honestly, we never really had to multitask as much as we did today. Like back in the day, you'd have a village that would bring up a family, you wouldn't just be trying to do everything and trying to juggle everything. And I think this, not just the emotional load, but the need to get kids to an appointment or worry about it, worry about sports or all of these different things, worrying about navigating traffic. All of these things take a lot of mental load, and that has consequences. Like we've gone so far away from the way we as social beings were meant to live. We've forced ourselves into this nuclear family, and we put all of this pressure on ourselves and, maybe our significant other to get things done. But we've actually never really in human history had to do that until recently.
Yeah, like so many of the things that occupy our brain space and are sources of stress are things that probably didn't even exist 50, 100 and thousands of years ago, right?
Exactly, yeah. Now we have to worry about getting stuck in traffic, or, is there going to be a breakdown on the road, or all of these things that, are part of our life now, but never used to be part of our lives. And being certain places at a certain time, before you just do things as they arise and go with the flow. You'd have that kind of, we call it time affluence. So when you feel like you've got control of your time, then you feel happier and you're less stressed. But in today's society where you're running from one thing to the next and you don't feel like you have any control over things, that's a stressor, and it's not good for us.
You did a really interesting TED Talk that I wanted to tap into a little bit, and you spoke about hacks for learning faster. So what are 6 hacks to learn faster?
They sound really logical, but when I explain it, it'll make more sense. So attention, alertness, sleep, repetition, breaks, and mistakes. So in order to learn something, you need to be paying attention to it, right? You can't be distracted. You've got to give it your attention, then you'll learn. You've got to be alert. If you're tired and sleepy, then it's going to be hard to pay attention. You need to keep repeating the thing that you're doing, because basically the brain doesn't want to change, And in order for you to learn, your brain is physically changing. It's making these brand new little connections called synapses between neurons when you're learning, right? And the brain isn't going to want to put all of that energy into making these new connections if it's something that you've only done once. And so when you're repeating something, it's basically flagging to your brain and saying, hey, this is important because it keeps coming up over and over again. So let's actually physically change and make that process easier and more efficient. So repetition is really critical when it comes to learning. Sleep is important too. So, we used to think that sleep was a bit of a waste of time. We're spending a third of our lives in suspended animation, just like chilling. But
that's how I want to live. Okay, let's up that. Let's bring that percentage up a little, shall we?
Yeah, and it's actually critical for learning. So when we're doing things throughout the course of the day, we're putting things into a short-term memory storage. So part of our brain called the hippocampus is really just keeping track of what we're doing and what's sort of important. So if I was to ask you what you were doing this morning or what you had for breakfast, you're using your hippocampus to recall that information. And when we go to sleep, basically all of those important things throughout the course of the day get flitted off into other parts of our long-term memory storage. So if you don't sleep, the short-term stuff doesn't get converted into long-term memory. So, that's why it's so important to sleep. You have to think of sleep almost as is really the time when your brain is changing and actually doing the consolidation, the actual learning.
Yeah, it's doing its file storage at that time.
Yeah. We often feel bad when we make a mistake and we kind of feel a bit anxious, and it's not a nice feeling.
Yeah.
But really mistakes are really important when it comes to learning. So when we make a mistake and we feel a bit anxious and we're feeling uncomfortable, what's actually happening is our brain is releasing all of these neurochemicals that are actually helping us to pay attention. That's where the agitation comes from. It's actually creating these neurochemicals to make us focus on the thing that we just did wrong.
Yeah.
And I guess the next part of that is it's also opening up this little window of neuroplasticity. So whatever we do next, the brain's much more likely to be a bit of a sponge and take up. So we make a mistake, we feel a bit anxious, but it's our brain's way of preparing us to pay attention. And then we do it again and hopefully get it right. And when we get it right, our brain releases other chemicals like dopamine, and it makes that memory stick into place. So when you're trying to learn something, don't just wait until you're ready to test your knowledge. Just keep testing yourself as you go. Like if you're trying to play a sport, get it wrong, make it difficult. Let's say you're trying to play basketball, take a weird shot at a weird angle and test yourself. Allow yourself to make that mistake because that way, yes, you might get it wrong at first, but also you're making your brain remember how to do it right a lot better, and it becomes a lot more efficient. Let's say you're trying to learn a speech or something. Don't wait until you think you've memorized it all to actually say it all out loud. Just actually say it when you don't know it. You'll actually have a much better chance of consolidating that information. I think we often tell ourselves that, when we make a mistake, it's a bad thing, but actually it's the best thing we can do for learning. We really need to embrace that discomfort and that feeling and lean into it.
Yeah. Do you have any hacks for anybody who, especially like in a corporate workplace kind of, or any sort of workplace scenario, when you make a mistake, what should be the next step to really take advantage of some of those chemical reactions that are happening in your brain? Because I know for me, if I make a mistake, that feeling kicks in, but sometimes that can be quite overwhelming and it feels more like debilitating rather than being like, okay, how do I jump on and like take advantage of this and see it as a bit of a superpower?
Yeah.
Like what would be the next best steps on using that as a learning opportunity instead of like spiraling and potentially being mean to yourself about the mistake that you made?
I think knowledge is power. I think knowing that discomfort is actually your brain just helping you to be the best version of yourself and leaning into that, it makes it easier. If you don't know that, then of course you're just going to be like, this feels horrible, let's walk away from it and let's just not try again.
Yeah.
But if you know that actually it's just a good thing ultimately, then you can sort of lean into it a bit better.
Yeah, okay. All right, cool. So did we get through all six? We had alertness,
Breaks.
sleep, breaks.
Yeah, breaks. So especially in, if you're, 25 or above, we know that if if you try and do something else as soon as you've finished learning something, those brand new memories are really fragile and they're really easy to get like overwritten in your brain. And so you really need to spend time taking a break and just letting yourself mull over whatever it is that you've done. So let's say you've just sat down to learn something and then you finished learning and then you go and scroll on your phone. That's pretty much the worst thing you can do because you're using those, you're putting irrelevant information into your brain and you have a much bigger chance of sort of overriding those new memories. But actually taking a break and then just chilling out, and when you're in that space of just chilling out, you're actually replaying the things that you've just done. You're not aware of it necessarily, but you're actually thinking through it, you're actually processing it. And when you're processing it, it's actually another form of repetition. So you're just actually practicing it. So an example of this is they did a study in people who are learning how to play the piano. And when you take a break, like a 20-second break after learning that little sequence, your brain is replaying it afterwards and you're just actually repeating that information in your mind. And it does that really, really quickly. So it's a really useful thing to do. One thing I didn't mention when we're talking about alertness, so it's really important to be alert in order for you to learn. And one of the best things to do is actually just get a little bit of exercise, get your heart rate pumping. So let's say you've got an important meeting that you need to, or you're about to sit down to learn, go for a run or run up and down the stairs or do star jumps, do whatever it is to get those chemicals, these neurochemicals. They don't just affect your body, they affect your brain as well, and they help you feel more alert and pay attention to what you're about to do.
Oh, I like that. Is it cardio especially? Is that the sort of exercise that people should be doing, or is it anything?
Well, whatever it is to get your heart rate up.
Okay.
Yeah, so you really want to get those things like adrenaline and noradrenaline released in order to make you feel, a bit more peppy and help you pay attention.
That's a really good hack. I like that because it's super achievable. And I think something else that I've seen just doing research and stuff for the show is I read an article by a neuroscientist, I'll find it and I'll link it in the show notes, but she was saying that actually when we take breaks is when our brain can be creative, and that boredom truly is what fuels creativity. And because we're constantly pacifying ourselves with media, whether that's scrolling on your phone or always having a podcast playing or always listening to music or going into the shower and putting YouTube on, whatever it is, like we have that constant chase now and we don't ever let our brains be quiet.
Exactly. We don't let ourselves be bored, and being bored is one of the greatest things we can do for creativity. So part of our brain we call it the default mode network. It doesn't matter what it's called, but it's basically where our brain starts wandering and we start thinking about ideas and connecting them in like weird and abstract ways. That's where we come up with our creative ideas. The genius moments happens when you're bored, like when you're in the shower, wherever it might be. And this is maybe a little bit of a kind of weird concept, but bear with me for a second. So in human history, the time where people weren't suddenly worrying about shelter and worrying about food and finally actually had time to be bored, that's when human civilization really blossomed. So the Bronze Age is a time where they figured out to mix these metals together and develop bronze, and it allowed them to make these tools like, like things to use for agriculture, to make buildings, all those sorts of things. So suddenly it was really easy to get lots of food. It was suddenly great to make lots of shelter. All those things that used to be problems on a daily basis now no longer were there. So suddenly people had time to be bored. They had time to work on artisan crafts. That's where mathematics was developed. That's where language was developed. It all came from humans not being in a fear state anymore and actually being able to be bored and therefore be creative. So really, boredom is where the root of human civilization came from. It's such an important thing. And we don't let ourselves be bored. It's almost like we can't sit down without just scrolling our phones. We're always looking for a way to fill the time.
Yeah, is that like an anxiety response, or is it like a habit loop that we've kind of just found ourselves in? Like, why is that?
Probably a bit of both.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, social media it gives us what we want. It's a cute, interesting cat video. It's a funny bit of content. It's an interesting podcast. It's interesting. It's a great way to fill the time. And being bored can sometimes feel uncomfortable. So it's almost like we're self-soothing ourselves.
Right.
If you don't have to be bored, then why would you bother?
Yeah, okay. And a lot of these things impact memory, right? Because like you said, if you're not getting enough sleep, or if we're constantly pacifying ourselves with some of these things, we're not giving our brain the chance to do that busy work it needs to file things away.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you, what about the concept of false memories? Like, what's with that? Because, sometimes you'll be like, no, I swear I sent that birthday message. I swear I did. And then you look and you're like, no, I didn't.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, we sort of we like to think of our memory as being like CCTV footage, like it's a perfect recollection of things, but it's not. It's really a collection of memories that we then try and piece together when we're trying to recall what might have happened at a certain thing. And that also means that it's really vulnerable to change as well. So the longer we spend after an event has happened and we try and recall what happened at that event, then the more likely it is that those memories can be changed and can be influenced by things that we've done. So let's just say we went to a party a couple of weeks ago and I have my version of what happened at that party, but you tell me that you remember that something else happened and we have that conversation, then my brain might start to sort of piece that into the memory of what happened, even though I never was there or never actually saw it.
Yeah.
And we see that all the time. And that's sort of why we have this thing called a statute of limitations in the court process when someone has experienced something traumatic or whatever it might be, and they're trying, I guess because those memories aren't as trustworthy as time goes on, it's hard to use that as evidence.
Yeah, like our context and perceptions and other influences can really impact our memory.
Totally, yeah.
That's so interesting. I think that's very validating in a way, because it happens more and more as you get older as well. So I think it can be a little bit unnerving, but it's good to know that it is, sort of just a natural process. What about popcorn brain? What is
Popcorn
it?
brain. It's this, well, I guess it's a pop term that sort of describes how our brain sort of bounces about from one thing to the next. Our attention is constantly shifting and popping around. But really that's also kind of because of social media a lot. So if you think about it like this, so our brain is really good at learning from things that we do all the time. And if we're constantly using our phones and seeing one bit of information and then seeing a different kind of bit of information, we're constantly actually context switching. We're looking at one thing and then looking at the next thing. So we're actually training our brain to have bad attention. We're training it to be able to move from one thing to the next because that's what we're doing. And so the more you do that, the easier it becomes. And so our brain will just naturally move from one thing to the next.
Yeah, right. And because in some of the things that I've read around popcorn brain, a lot of people talk about it in relation to women and that a lot of women experience it. Why is that in particular?
Well, I guess the more you have other stresses in life or the more burdens you might have in other places, the more you're likely to have a fragmented attention span. So let's say you've got a huge emotional load trying to figure out things in the house and juggling family or whatever it might be, or, we're hustling, we're doing lots of different jobs, then you're already a bit stressed, right? And so that burden of stress makes it a lot harder to pay attention to things. It actually fragments our ability to pay attention. So when you're really stressed in life, it affects the brain. And it's not just a small effect, it's actually quite significant. So let's say you're worrying about paying the bills and you're worrying about, covering rent and you're worrying about getting from A to B and you're worrying about everything else at home and you're worrying about your job. That is a chronic stress. And over time, it changes our brain structure and the way we behave. So one of the things it does is it makes your hippocampus, the brain's memory center, shrink, like brain cells actually die. And so your memory gets worse.
So stress is shrinking our brains.
Yeah. Actually it makes one part of the brain bigger. It makes the emotion part of the brain bigger, which is why we get more emotional and more visceral and just a bit more reactive to things. Because that's it. It makes sense. Like if you've constantly got stress in your life, then the part of your brain that's involved with dealing with stress wants to get bigger so you can deal with the next stress that comes along.
Oh my God. Yeah, you've just blown my mind. I just had like that was a real like 1 + 1 = 2 moment for me.
But it's also like we have to remind ourselves it's not that we've changed as a person. It's not that we've become more angry or aggressive. It's just that our brain is doing its best to try and cope with that situation. So it's not our fault. So we need to be kind to ourselves as well.
Yeah. Can you reverse some of those things?
Yeah, you definitely can. So, I mean, I guess the rule of thumb is that the longer you've been stressed, then the longer it's going to take to bounce back. But some of the great things to do to reduce the level of stress or to reduce the impact of stress are things like exercise. So exercise helps you make new brain cells in the hippocampus. It makes it bigger. You can do things like mindfulness or meditation practices, which are really great as well. You can do breathing techniques. You might have heard the physiological sigh. So it's where you do this. It's really the best way to de-escalate a panic attack, actually. So
walk me through.
You do 2 inhales through your nose and then a long exhale. So I'll show you in a second, but an example of it is imagine, when a kid might be throwing a tantrum or you're crying really, really hard and you go, that's actually the physiological sigh. We don't even know we're doing it. We're actually self-soothing ourselves.
Your body is like forcing you to do it.
Yeah. So it's 2 inhales through the nose. So the second inhale is just like fully filling up the lungs with air and then a long exhale. So you have to spend a longer time exhaling. And it has to be in that order, otherwise it doesn't really work. So let's do it together. So 2 inhales and then a long exhale and then we'll do it again.
Okay, so inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. Okay, let's do it together, chicks. Ready?
Right.
Whoa.
Can you feel that?
Yeah.
And you do it 3 times, you'll watch your heart rate go down. I already feel way more chill. Like that's great.
I was like, shit, I need to do that every pod, just halfway through.
Yeah. And if you do it for 5 minutes, then it has like really measurable effects on how your body is functioning. It's like the greatest hack almost, but it's not a hack. It's what our body does anyway.
Yeah. But it's being conscious of that too, because if you're like, like you said, if you're crying or if you're spiraling a little bit and your body's doing it once, it's like, I'm sure that helps. But if you're conscious of it and say if you're in a really stressful work situation, you're like, I'm going to go for a walk quickly or I'm going to go to the bathroom quickly and spend a few minutes doing that. I'm sure being more conscious about it and actually giving that the time and the space to also do it properly can really have a solid impact.
Absolutely. Another thing that's really great for stress as well is socializing, like actually just hanging out with people that you like. It has to be people that you like. If you don't like it, it's not going to be not stressful.
Yeah.
But when you're hanging out with people that you like, it does a lot of things. But one of them is that, you're talking about it. So I guess it takes the fear away from whatever situation you're in because you feel safe because you're in a safe space. And also you're releasing all of these neurochemicals, things like oxytocin. People call it the love hormone, but it's more than that. Yes, it makes you feel closer to whoever you're talking to, but also it reduces the level of our stress hormone cortisol. So it actually, like part of the reason why we feel better and feel less stressed is because those stress hormones go down.
Yeah.
And, at the end of the day, we know that the people who live happiest for the longest have the best social connections. And so really, having great friendships or having just people that you trust that you can connect with really has a profound influence on your life. We know that people who are lonely live less long. In fact, they're about 30% more likely to die. It's about as bad as having a pack a day of cigarettes. It's really not good for us. Like, we're designed to be a social species. We're meant to be hanging out.
Wow, no way. That is actually wild. And because even though we're more and more connected to people now, there have been studies that show that young people especially are feeling more emotions of like loneliness and feeling secluded from people, right? So it's so important to make time for those social connections, but also pay attention to how you feel after you spend time with someone, right?
Yeah.
Because somebody might be a friend because you've had history with them or like we said earlier, like you've gone to school with them or maybe you work with them. But pay attention to how you feel. Do you feel stressed and anxious afterwards? Because it might be a friendship, but it's like, is it good for your nervous system?
Exactly. Yeah, you've got to trust that feeling. And it has to be face-to-face. You don't get that from texting. You don't get that from digital connection. It has to be a face-to-face thing. Another thing that happens when we're face-to-face, like right now,
Yeah.
we're not aware of it, but our brains are starting to synchronize. Like certain parts of our brain are synchronizing the brain waves, which the first time I heard that, I thought it was a bunch of whack. I was like, what is this? But the science is solid. Like we're doing that. We're actually synchronizing in parts of our brain. So
Is that why you like finish people's sentences and stuff when you're together in person, or like you do feel like you start to talk similar to or like behave in similar ways to your friends the more that you spend time with them?
Yeah, maybe there's a bit of that, because you're actually kind of in sync. You know, often when you say you're on the same wavelength, maybe there's a bit more to that than we realise.
Yeah, wow. Oh my God. I was just thinking, I was like, so if our brains are syncing up currently, does that mean that I'm becoming smarter or I'm making you dumber? Because if so, I feel bad. If
I'm learning from you. I mean, I already learnt where to get the best blazers in Canberra. So, yeah.
True. We were saying off air before that if you go to Canberra, go to the Vinnies there because all the politicians let go of their old blazers at the op shops and they're all incredible quality and like $15.
Genius, yeah.
See, look, I love this.
I wish I knew this yesterday though. Anyway.
That's right. We'll just have to go to Canberra again. And I also read that humans now have an attention span of 47 seconds, but it takes 23 minutes to refocus on a task when you become distracted. So do you have any hacks that are backed by neuroscience to help us stay focused or regain focus?
Well, we've just got to train our mental muscles basically. So we've got to actually force ourselves to pay attention to things. So one thing that you could do is just, let's say 20 minutes a day, you put your phone away, put every distraction away that you possibly have, and just focus on whatever it is that you're trying to focus on. And the more you do that, the easier it will get. Other ways that you can sort of train your focus is through things like focused attention meditation, which is basically a type of meditation where you're just, you might be focusing on one body part at a time. But by doing that, you're focusing your attention and it just helps train that mental muscle. Other things you could do are, I always love having a pad next to me when I'm working because when an idea pops into my head or something that I was meant to do pops into my head, I write it down. And it's really important to write it down because it takes it out of your working memory. So you're not, we've got this finite amount of working memory. It's basically, the working memory is pretty much this really, really, really short-term memory that stores about the information that allows you to do what you're doing in that moment. So my working memory has told me, I'm aware of what I just said so I don't repeat it. It's like just that really, it's in the moment, right?
Yeah.
And if you're also thinking about, I need to do this thing, you're going to keep thinking about it. But by putting it down on paper, you can take it out of that working memory and you can just focus on what you're doing.
Yeah,
so
you can
things
let it
like
go.
that. Yeah. So it allows you to give that attention to the thing that you're doing, giving it the attention it deserves.
And does it need to be physical? Like, should you be writing it down on a piece of paper or can you type it out?
You can type it out. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of like acknowledging that you've got it covered.
Yep.
You can let it go now.
Yeah.
I find that really helpful before bed. And that's why I love to create my to-do lists at the end of the work day. And I do like a closing shift before I go to bed and I write down like, these are the things that I need to do. I get everything kind of organized that I need to for the next morning because otherwise I find it so hard to fall asleep.
Yeah. Perfect example of how useful it can be. Otherwise you might be sitting in bed thinking, I have to do that tomorrow. I better not forget. And then you stay up worrying about it because you're not sure if you'll remember in the morning.
Yeah, exactly.
Just write it down. Yeah.
Okay, I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I've learnt so much and I know the chicks would have as well. But before I let you go, we always like to wrap our episodes with our guests by asking them one final question. So across your studies and research of the brain and neuroscience, what's the biggest life lesson you've learnt so far?
I think the most important thing that I've learnt is something called belief effects. So belief effects are this thing where you might have heard of the placebo effect, right? Where you take a sugar pill and it might have an effect on you because you think it might do something good for you, even though it's got nothing in it that might be useful. The same thing applies to how we think about things. So if you think something bad is going to happen, you're more likely to release a lot of stress hormones that can ultimately have a bad effect on your body. One of my favourite studies of all time is called the milkshake study, and it's by Ali Crum in the United States. And really what that study was is she had a bunch of people that she had chocolate milkshakes, and, they either had the chocolate milkshake, which she told them was like rich and decadent and full of calories and all that stuff. And then she had another one, which she told them it was like a normal sort of like nutritious milkshake. It was the same milkshake, right? But based on what they thought it was, their body released different amounts of hormones. And so if they thought it was a rich, decadent milkshake, they released less, or it changed the amount of the hormone that makes them feel full. So they felt fuller for longer because they thought it was a rich, decadent milkshake. And this blew my mind, because what it shows us is that what we think can change how much of our hormones get released. Other thing, it changes our physiology at this deep, deep level. And I think what this new science of belief effects really shows us is that we have the power to change our body in a way that can really serve us. So we often tell ourselves in our minds about how something might happen. We might worry about it. We might say, okay, I think this is going to go really badly, and things will just not work out for me. And when you do that, you'll be releasing maybe more stress hormones, and things will go more badly.
Yeah.
But why not just tell yourself the positive version of events? Why not just say, actually, I think this is going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. And not only will you have a better physical body state, you will perform better. Like, science shows us this now. So how we think about things really matters. Mindset really matters. And I really take that forward in so many parts of my life. I used to have a fear of public speaking, which might sound a bit weird because I do a lot of it now.
Yeah.
But one of the things I learnt was, well, when you view that stress response and your heart racing and your palms being sweaty and you're breathing fast, if you tell yourself that it means that you're not coping with the situation, then you will do worse. But if you remind yourself that actually that's just your body's stress response helping you to deal with that situation and to, improve your performance, then you will do better.
Yeah.
So that's really a really pivotal thing for me. And I think it should be for all of us, like, mindset matters.
Oh, I love that. And because it kind of sounds like manifestation in a way, which I do think a lot of people resonate with, but a lot of people also think like, it's woo-woo bullshit. And if you're maybe a little bit more science inspired, then knowing the neuroscience behind that, proves to you that mindset is so important.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, for any of the chicks who don't already follow you, where can they find you and learn more about you and the work you do?
You can find me at Rocket Scientist on pretty much any social media. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, we'll put links to that and your TED Talk and your website and everything in the show notes as well, so the chicks can find you.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lila. And thank you, chicks, for having us in your ear holes. We love to be here. And thanks to Al. Miss you. Bye, chicks.
Bye.
Bye.